So you let me know if I'm audible enough and if there's any problem. All right. So what a company. So we're just the two of us. Let's enjoy our class. Let's just be free like we did the last time. And yeah, if I'm not audible, you're my admin, just let me know. So we're going to be looking at a company today and we're looking at company law. So it's going to be interesting for us to know what a company is like and what are characteristics of a company and many other things. Yeah. So since you did a bit of what a company is, and maybe I would be assuming I did, but just from what you know, the ideas put together, what is a company? What is a company in your own definition? Maybe not even what you went, but
Okay. What I know about a company is that this is an organization which is owned by people who put shares or who put who put shares to run the business entity. Yeah. So
what did
these
you say?
people, I'm saying a company is owned by shareholders. Yeah, these people are the ones who put monies together to fund the running of the company. Like they come together and they put the monies together for the company to run. And those people are called shareholders. Am I audible? Hello? Hello?
Hello, I'm saying you're very much audible. I'm able to get everything that you said.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so there's another participant that we have. Okay, so Mwinde, you're welcome to our class.
Thank you, madam.
All right, so I was just asking Mr. Rasdell to define what a company is. So he was saying that a company is a legal entity, obviously, and then this company is formed by shareholders, and these people come together, they put their resources together, and from there, they fund the project or whatsoever that which their a vision of the company is. Yeah. So maybe before I go any further, maybe Mrs. Mwinde, you have anything that you would want to say about just the definition of a company in your own understanding? Maybe from where you're working, or something that you're running, or maybe you're under a company, or just your own definition of what you've learned. What is a company to you?
I think what Mr. Raxdale said is loud and clear. Just okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah. So a company is a limited legal entity. This legal entity is formed by a group of people, and these people are people that are working or work together to achieve a common goal in a nutshell. Yeah, so usually it's either to sell or to buy or any other thing, but something that would involve trade of a service or even of a good. Yeah. But ultimately, it should be a legal entity. It's formed by a group of people who are working together to achieve a common goal. That is what a company is. That's what a company. Yeah. So this company, like we said in the previous class, we were talking about a sole trader and we talked about a partnership. When we're looking at a company, this legal entity, for it to stand as a company, it must be liable. It must be limitedly liable, very much registered. For example, we can talk about ShopRite is a company. We can talk about Zanaco, commercial banks. Those are companies, yeah, that offer financial services to the public. We can talk about Trade Kings. Those are examples of companies that stand on their own and their legal entities. Yeah. And then, like Mr. Rasdell said, the people that own a company are called shareholders. They are called shareholders. Yeah. So who runs this company? Who runs a company? So it has shareholders. Shareholders will say these are people that own the company. But they own the company, but not really run the company. Like, for example, if you can buy shares in Zanaco, depending on how much you have, you can invest, buy shares, you stock Lusaka Stock Exchange, you buy your shares. You will have your shares, but the directions and the whatnot will depend on the directors. Yeah. So as a board of shareholders, depending on how many shares you have in this company, if they have been sold publicly, depending on how much you've gotten and how much you've invested in that company, and depending on what type of a company it is, you sit down, you form a board of directors, you choose who and who. Sometimes you can even employ outside the shareholders. You are just people that have shares. And then if you're affording to, for example, like ShopRite, to even employ managers, directors, well, those people, they are managers, they are directors, and yet they do not own ShopRite itself. Yeah, so the people that run a company are called directors. Yeah. And finally, I would want to know from you, my colleagues, what do we call um what do we call what do we call the portion of profit that a company makes and that which they distribute to its shareholders? A company makes profit and then it distributes that profit according to the ratio of shares. What do we call that profit? What do we call the profit that has been made by a company and then it has been shared to the shareholders? At the end of the year, for example, Zanaco makes profit, total up, and then you get that profit and then you share it to the shareholders. But what do we call that profit is what I want to know. Anyone who knows? Okay.
They are called dividend.
All right. Thank you so very much. Thank you to the both of you. Yeah, so we call it dividend. Yeah, so you receive dividend at the end. It could be at the end of a financial year, depending on how much profit is being made and how frequent is it even made, and maybe also on the laws that has been set in that very company. Yeah, so I want us to dive direct from there into the characteristics of a company. What are the characteristics of a company? What differentiates a company from a business? Previously, we looked at a business formation, which we said does not even require a lot of paperwork. It's something that you just go to PACRA register and everything moves from there because you're a sole trader, because you're a partnership, maybe just the fact that partnership has the Partnership Act that needs us to set the terms and conditions of the partnership. Apart from that, we just move. While when we're looking at a company, it has got different types, different characteristics. And yeah, maybe in future or even now, or maybe planning, one of us might want to even have and maybe own a company or be a director of a company. And being a company law student, it is wise of us to know just in the head when somebody talks about a company, you have to know it from the management, what really goes on, from the top to the last or the least of employees. Yeah. So yeah, before I come in to talk about the characteristics myself, I want to give chance to everyone to just highlight some of the characteristics that they can still remember from what they learned during residentials, or just what they know from the experience that you guys have had in this society. So I'll start with Madam Mwinde, then Mr. Razdel is going to come after Madam Mwinde. So Madam, what characteristics of a company do you know very well and you would explain to say, oh, I know this. Or maybe I know this, but I can't explain. I don't really understand, but I can mention this. What are those characteristics?
Thank you, madam.
Okay.
Some of the characteristics of a company, a company has a separate entity.
Uh-huh.
So yes, so meaning a company is separate. A company's entity is separate from the shareholders' property. So whoever owns a company is on. Sorry, the baby is crying. Sorry. Mtendeni. Mtanda, come. Sorry, madam.
Okay, no problem, no problem. You can attend to the baby. Yeah. But just let us know when you start talking, and then we can give you a chance. Yeah, so she was talking about separate legal entity. Yeah. So she was saying that a company has a separate legal entity from its owners, who are the shareholders. Do you have anything to say, Razdel, on what really it means to have a separate legal entity?
Okay, yeah, just in line with what she has said, separate legal entity means that the company is on its own responsible to pay its creditors. So,
Very excellent.
yeah, so the company on its own, it can be sued. Yeah.
Wow, that's very good. That's even everything. So thank you, Mr. Razdel, for adding on to what Mindy just mentioned. Yeah, so like you have said, if they can be sued, then they can also sue. That's what it implies. And since they're a separate legal entity, if they can pay their creditors, then they can also borrow money. Yeah. So after they lend, then they can, if they are in the capacity to borrow, which encompasses the fact that they are independent. Yeah. So a company has a distinct entity and is independent of its members or people controlling it. Yeah. So it's so funny how it's so different. When you're an asset, this is just an example. When you're an asset, which is very true. But for example, if you're working for the Bank of Zambia, if you're fired, from there, or maybe you choose to resign, it's that resigning of you as an individual. For example, Mr. Razdel resigns. Your resigning won't affect It may affect some parts of the company of Bank of Zambia, but it cannot affect Bank of Zambia in any way, because Bank of Zambia is just like a different human being that is, this will lead me to even talk about the next point. It's an artificial person. So this whole entity, this whole company is an artificial person that has no emotions, feelings, or whatsoever. So its existence is separate from a sole trader who exists, and the business also exists in them. Yeah. So the second point that I would bring in, as Mr. Razde will be coming in, is that this one of the other characteristics is that this company I would say it's an artificial legal person in itself. So in the eyes of the law, a company is an artificial legal person. So this company being an artificial legal person, just like Mr. Rasdale said, it's able to sue, and it's able to be sued. And then it has a right to enter into a contract and also not enter into a contract. It has the right to sell goods and not sell. It has the right to, for example, dispose its assets and acquire assets. For example, you guys who are under the University of Zambia, you understand that just UNZA as it stands is a very big company, if I would put it, because they own different things. They own a farm. They just do different businesses under the very same name, UNZA. Yeah. But if anything happens, they won't sue any lecturer there. It's just an artificial legal person that is standing in it, and it has got from the vice chancellor up until us, the students, and many others that come down after us, if at all there are any other. Yeah. So apart from it existing differently, a company should have an artificial legal person. That is what a company is. It is an artificial legal person standing on its own, and it's existing different from the owners of the business, or rather the people that run it, which have said they are directors. Yeah. So apart from that, Mr. Rasdale, you can come in as well. What other characteristics does a company have? What
Okay.
features?
The other characteristic is that
Mm-hmm.
that the company has is continuity.
Continuity. Uh-huh.
Yes. Unlike the sole trader, where we said that if the owner of the business dies,
Mm-hmm.
the business also dies. So
Yes.
for the company, since there are a lot of shareholders involved, if
Yeah.
one shareholder dies, the company still continues. So the
Oh,
company
yeah.
can run for a longer period. So there's
Wow, that is very
continuity in short. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so very much. Yeah, so just like Mr. Rasdale has said, we say it's continuity, or we can say perpetual existence. Just like he's mentioned, the life of a company is not dependent on the shareholders. The life of a company is just going to exist. This is why, for example, if at all you are maybe a family man, and then you want your company to last forever, even such that when you die, that company should be in existence up until forever. Many of the people would rather, instead of it being a sole trader business, they would rather it is registered. They would rather it is registered as a company, because they know that even after their death, in the sense that maybe they have 60% of the shares, then 40 have been sold to any shareholder. even after their death, that company will still exist because they might just sell off your shares, or maybe some other, or maybe your children inherit them, but then it just continues to exist because the people that run it are not an individual. They would just come and go. This is what happens even in a government setup where people are employed, people are fired. We are seeing what is happening nowadays with our current president. He fires people. Any sort of thing that we hear, anything that he hears as proof, you're fired and you're replaced. You're replaced here and then without even affecting anything. No changes, but the changes is just that they've put another person. So the government will still continue running whether your presence is there or not. Yeah. So that's also what a company looks like. Yeah. So apart from that, we would say that for a company to be a company, you would bear with me that when you go to school, for example, each and every time you need maybe copies of something for it to prove that yes, you're a student from the University of Zambia. There should always be a seal, a common seal, which we say that, which we can call a stamp, that to be an example of a seal each and every time. Sometimes they just require you to have your document, for example, a confirmation slip. That is the best example that I would use. A confirmation slip that you have paid, yeah? A confirmation slip that you have paid, and maybe you need to represent it to DOSA or something for you to show that you've paid your fees. So they will tell you that we need a confirmation slip that has been stamped by ... maybe by what, whosoever which will stamp that confirmation slip. So that very seal, for a company to stand as a company, it must have a common seal. A company being it's an artificial legal person. It uses a common seal. That common seal might have or should have the name of the company engraved in it. Yeah. So some people, as a substitute, if maybe you don't have a seal, this is a startup company, you've registered everything, but you've not yet purchased your seal that you're going to be using. Or sometimes you'd be using a signature as just a substitute of a seal. But I think that should have it should have a limit to what extent, because there are just some heights where you can't use a signature. There are just some heights where your company, Mr. Rasdale, it has grown to an extent where you can't just use a seal. You have to use you can't just use a signature. No. You just need a seal to represent you. Yeah. So that's also one. I'm trying to, as I'm explaining and as you're giving in more of your points, I'm trying to just imagine what it's like to have or to be this company, just a company being something that is separate. So it's as good as a human also. But the fact that it has all these formalities, it just separates it. And I think, yeah, it's kind of more serious. So as a human, they will require you, for example, you're signing for a job, whatsoever, even just applying, you need to sign that letter to just represent you as a seal, to say, no, this is Madam Mwinde who signed here, and she's the one that wants this thing. Yeah. Or even being given a room at UNZA, you need to sign somewhere. So that is just in itself, us as human beings, we are kind of companies on our own. It's just that we have nothing. Maybe we have those very things running, but we are not really just maybe trading, but whatsoever is happening in our life is some sort of like a company. Yeah. So Madam Winde, are you in the right position now? Do you have any other characteristic or feature that you would want to add apart from what we've said? Or maybe before I go any further, do we have any questions on the existence, the artificial legal person? We've said also the separate legal entity, and now just talking about the seal. So a company must have a seal because it's a different person, and that seal is some sort of representation of what that person is like. Yeah. So I want to know from Madam Winde if you're able to say something now or you're able to get me. And then I want to know if there are any other questions before I proceed to more characteristics, if at all there are any.
Oh, okay. I'm okay now. I'm able to speak. Maybe
Okay,
just to
you can
add
go.
on the characteristics.
Yeah.
Yes. So another characteristic of the company is the transferability of shares. So
Mm-hmm.
meaning at least it's possible for some shares to be transferred from one person to another.
Yeah.
So that leads to change of names. You transfer your shares
Mm,
or you sell your shares to someone else, then they can
mm.
also change the name of the business due to the shares that they've been given.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Mr. Rasdale, is that clear?
Yes, madam.
All right. So, like you said, transferability of shares. So they can be transferred. Yeah, I remember there is a point when I just graduated and I was broke, very broke. And all I wanted was to just sell off my shares. I had some shares in Zanaco. So all I wanted was to sell them off and just have that money and use it to just start up life. Yeah. So it took me, so the process is 3 days. So you go to Lusaka Stock Exchange. The process is 3 days. They'll tell you to wait for 3 days. They'll sell them, and then somebody else will purchase them. And from there, depending on how much you have, yeah, you might remain with some if you choose, and then you might just sell, just like that. So they are transferable compared to a sole trader who owns everything to themselves. Yeah. And then apart from that, there's also something that is common that we can talk about. We can also talk about the idea of um, um, incorporated association. Incorporated association. So a company comes into existence when it is registered under the Company Act. Yeah. So it can't just exist anyhow. It must be registered under the Act. So that entails that there are some rules and regulations that qualify something, a business, to be a company. Yeah. So a company has to fulfill certain requirements in terms of, for example, documentation. You need some documents to be in place for you to be qualified as a company. The shareholders, how many shareholders do you need to have as a company? So as you are guys, as you are planning on as you're thinking about opening those companies, or if at all you're running those companies already, you'd agree with me that if at all you were there participating as you were opening that company, you needed a certain number of shareholders, a certain number even of directors. How many directors do you need? Even apart from that, there's something that is very important, the share capital. How much capital do you need? Because as far as I'm concerned, just as you're opening a company, one of the requirements in your documentation is to show them how much you have in your account as a company. So the law has got a certain amount that it prescribes for each and everyone, that depending on the company that you're opening, that you must have in the account. So this share capital, how much do you have, is very, very important. All these, the documentation, the shareholders, they are all deemed to be legal associations that you need to associate yourself with as you are opening this company that you're opening. Yeah. So all those formalities, I think there are a lot of things you also need to go to ZWA, ensure that you are accredited when it comes to payment of tax. To those that have already gone through the process, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. You need to have your account very registered with your bank very well. And that account should stand in the name of the company, not in the name of you as an individual. So it needs you to go to PACRA, pay for the name, affiliate the name, ensure that the name will pass. Yeah, because yes, you submit the name and all those things. Yeah, so all that documentation, there's need for incorporated association. Yeah. Apart from that, we can also look at this one last one that is limited liabilities. This one is, yeah, something that we should always remember, that when we're talking about these other kinds of businesses, we said they have unlimited liabilities, while a company has liabilities that are limited. So shareholders, do we have anyone who wants to say anything? I'm hearing a mic. Okay, I hope everything is fine. If you have anything to say, please you can just unmute your mic and I'll give you the chance. Yeah. So limited liabilities. We said limited liability. We said unlimited involves you and your products and yourself and your house, all those things that you own, plus you someone. If things are not even okay, you would find yourself in prison because your business and you have no separate legal entity. Wow. When we're looking at a company, the people that pay the debt and the people that credit, like we say, they're different. So it's a separate legal person. So it pays its debts on its own. That's what happens when we're looking at a company. Yeah. So a company may be limited either by guarantee or by shares. It may be limited by guarantee or by shares, depending on the two. So when it's limited, when it's okay, maybe let me not even talk about that first. Let me first talk about this. So a company that is limited by shares, how liable are the shareholders? How answerable are you as a shareholder? Is limited on the value of the shares that you have. For example, if you, for example, have shares in any of the companies, you've been business students, if you have shares, or maybe you work with people that you work with companies that trade those very shares, you would agree with me that even just the say that you have in Zanaco, me who was like zero, maybe who has just 100 shares in Zanaco that has got like 1 billion shares, me who just has 100 shares might not even or close to not even having a say in Zanaco, because I'm so far away from the people that own it. But in as much as I'm a shareholder, I receive dividend here and there, but the decisions and the running of the company is far away from me. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah. Yeah, what I'm just trying to say is that the value of your shares, is what gives you the power to be answerable or not to be answerable. Because as we sit as board of directors, it is us, the shareholders, who choose even the board of directors. So how the company is affected, or what ruins or what builds the company, is really those that have, for example, 40% of the company is owned by Mr. Rasdale. If at all we are in debt or anything happens, I think he would also be under pressure. Not necessarily that his properties are going to be confiscated maybe by the people that we're owning or what. No, his personal properties are going to be safe. But it's going to be him also having some sort of a headache because 40% of whatsoever is running is under his name. So how answerable or how liable a person is dependent on the value of their shares. Does that make sense?
Not really.
Miss Mwinde?
I think I'm trying to analyze the
To grasp.
question. Yes.
Okay. How am I going to? I want to find the best way on how I'm going to, or even just the best example on how. Okay. So right now we're looking at limited liability. Limited liability. Yeah. So I was saying that when we're looking at limited liabilities, it falls in two grounds. There is one that is limited by shares, and the other that is limited by guarantee. So one that is limited by shares, the liability of the shareholders is limited to the unpaid value of their shares. So how liable? Because just being liable is you being answerable. Yeah, not being answerable in such that you're just going to give answers, but giving us even the financial reports whatsoever, just how far you would go when it comes to liability. So in a company limited by shares, the liability of the shareholders is limited to the unpaid value of their shares. So how answerable they are going to be is dependent on the nkongole that they have to the company. I don't know if that makes sense, but I don't know how best to put it. The nkongole that those people have, how much they own the business, how much they owe the business, the unpaid value of their shares is how they would be answerable to the business. Is how they would be, is how liable, is where the limitation ends. That is to say that if I am a shareholder, and if I am a shareholder, okay, Mr. Rasdale is a shareholder, and him being a shareholder, he has got like maybe, let me just say 40% of the business in his hands. Not really in his hand. The business is standing as a separate legal entity, but he has 40% that he has invested in that company. Yeah. And then out of the 40%, him being a big man in the business, that we, all of us, maybe I just have 10%, Miss Mindy has maybe 15 or 20, we respect him for the standing of the company. Yeah. So the company is able to lend him. It can when he comes to say, guys, I'm asking for maybe a 40 kwacha out of this business. I will bother with interest. Yeah. So we're saying that Okay, so now we give him. So in a company limited by shares, the liability of the shareholders is limited to the unpaid value of their shares. Does it add up? Does it make sense?
Yeah, madam, that one is a bit confusing, though I'm trying to process as well. So what you're trying to explain is the one who owns larger, more shares in the company controls the business, right?
Mhm. To the larger extent, that's what happens. So you have board of directors standing in and explaining and all those things, but yet, if at all you were going to withdraw, your 40%, it's as good as what is helping that company to be able to stand is how much this is why, for example, when we make it public, it is to all the world, so that at least the whole idea of maybe I should put it in Zanaco. Remember, there's a point when Zanaco was owned by just Zambia itself. Then we started selling, and then at some point, I don't know if it was last year or in Lungu's regime, where we reached an extent where it was no longer in our hands. We had like Zambia 40%, and then the people that were owning, those that were abroad, were like 60%. I don't know if you remember such a scenario. I'm not sure if it was really Zanaco, but I'm sure it's
Yes,
Zanaco.
it's Zanaco. Yeah, it's Zanaco.
It's Zanaco. Yeah, remember they even publicized it. They talked about it, even like, no, we're going to lose control of it whatsoever. Yes. So it's something that relates a little bit to it. I would say it relates to that. This point kind of relates to that. So the shareholders who own the most when it comes to a business are like they are spearheading. They spearhead most of the decisions, because imagine you own a 10% and I own a 90%. Who has a say in that thing? Obviously, you would. Exactly.
So
So
meaning
the
the liability of the shareholders, it's limited to the unpaid value of that one who owns more.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So when it comes to liability, anyway, it goes down. We'll talk about debentures and whatnot, but in a nutshell, that is what it is. So yeah, I think it, as much as we'll be going deep into seeing even the formations, what are the requirements, because we're going to talk about all those things. This point of limited liabilities is going to be more explained, because when we explain it, mostly we just end on the fact that the company is able to pay its debt on its own without really knowing really what really what is behind liability itself. Yeah.
All right, madam.
Yeah. So I would love us to continue, but then I have another class just right now at 20. It's so unfortunate that we joined late. I would have loved that we continue, but I'll end here so that I go and present another class